They thought firing me was clean. HR read the script, the CFO smirked, and security walked me out like I was already erased. What they didn't know was that every paycheck, every vendor bill, every compliance certificate still ran through the system I built, and I hadn't renewed a single license. By Monday morning, thousands of employees would wake up unpaid, vendors would cut ties, and regulators would start circling. That's not sabotage. It's the system doing exactly what it was designed to do, just without me carrying it anymore. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. They called it a restructuring, but really, it was an execution carried out in daylight. I sat across from Karen Mills, the HR director, with her carefully folded hands, as she read the lines like she'd practiced them in a mirror. "This isn't personal, Louise. We're moving in a new direction." Beside her, CFO Daniel Price wouldn't even look at me. He scrolled through his phone, smirking like he'd just won something. After 10 years of building the systems that carried this company, I was handed a severance packet and told to pack my desk by lunch. Security waited in the hallway, arms crossed, ready to escort me like a criminal. The worst part wasn't the humiliation, it was the indifference. The CEO didn't even show up. After a decade of keeping their paychecks flowing, their vendors satisfied, their regulators pacified, I was erased in less than 7 minutes. But they'd overlooked something. In their rush to cut costs, they forgot who held the final piece of the machine. My credentials, buried deep in the payroll servers, still tied every transaction, every compliance renewal, every authorization back to me. They thought I was disposable, just another middle-aged woman with obsolete skills. But while they walked me out with my box of family photos, my system sat in the server room like a sleeping giant, and I knew exactly when it would wake. Next Monday at 7 a.m., Payroll would run its batch. For the first time in company history, it would fail. That wasn't sabotage. It was inevitability. And as Daniel adjusted his tie and avoided my eyes, I realized he'd never see it coming until it was already too late. For years, I was invisible, the quiet presence tucked into the corner office with a server map taped above my desk and 3 monitors glowing late into the night. I didn't wear designer suits or give slick presentations at investor meetings, but every dollar that passed through this company traveled across the code I designed. When they acquired new branches, it was my framework that stitched payrolls together without regulators sniffing inconsistencies. When vendors demanded proof of compliance, it was my certifications, filed to the minute, that kept them from issuing penalties. They called me back office IT like I was some interchangeable cog, but the truth was simpler. I was the spine they leaned on without realizing it. Daniel Price, the CFO who smirked at my termination, loved telling the board that automation has reduced overhead by 30%. He never once admitted that the automation had a name, mine. The board clapped when he threw buzzwords across PowerPoint slides, but they never asked who made the slides possible. Meanwhile, I handled the endless patches, the renewals, the arcane clauses in compliance contracts that could bankrupt the company if missed. I never complained. I kept them safe while they spent bonuses on Teslas and beach houses. The irony is that Daniel once joked in front of the staff that even an intern could replace Louise. That day, I realized how blind they were, because the web I built wasn't just lines of code, it was authorization layered upon authorization, each renewal branching out like roots of a tree. Remove me, and the roots withered. By the time they noticed, it would be too late. They thought my work was invisible because they never understood it. But invisibility wasn't weakness. It was leverage. And leverage, in the right hands, is lethal. The first Monday after they fired me started like any other for them. Coffee runs, small talk in the elevators, Daniel Price strutting into the office with his phone glued to his ear. But at 7 a.m. sharp, The system I had built tried to run payroll without me. At 7:01, the first error flashed. Authorization key missing. By 7:05, 3,000 employees expecting deposits saw zero balances. Phones started buzzing, inboxes filled with angry messages, and managers across the country tried rebooting terminals that would only spit back failure codes. I wasn't inside the building anymore, but I didn't need to be. I was parked across the street in my car, watching the executives rush in like ants scrambling after someone kicked their hill. By 7:15, Daniel was already red-faced, whispering furiously into his headset while swiping through error reports he couldn't begin to understand. The truth was simple. Every financial system in that building still pointed back to the credentials they thought they had erased with me. But unlike me, the servers didn't forgive. They followed rules, and without the renewals only I controlled, the rules cut the company off at its knees. Watching them fumble was almost too easy. They thought they'd pulled a clean exit, but payroll wasn't just numbers on a screen, it was oxygen. And they were already choking. When payroll failed, the first wave was anger from employees. By mid-morning, group chats across the company exploded with screenshots of empty bank accounts. Parents couldn't pay for daycare, mortgages were hanging in limbo, and the night shift in Ohio staged a walkout before lunch. But the real damage didn't come from the staff. It came from the systems built to react when money stopped flowing. At 10 a.m., health insurance providers flagged the missed premium. Automatic coverage suspension notices rolled out. By 11 o'clock, 2 vendors locked company accounts for non-payment, freezing shipments mid-transit. A trucking fleet carrying millions in product was ordered to stop at the nearest depot until invoices cleared. At noon, the bank flagged irregularities in recurring transfers. That one alert was enough to trigger an automated audit. By 1:30, the company's credit line, its lifeline for daily operations, was suspended pending review. All of this unfolded without me touching a single line of code. The rules I had built, the deadlines I had maintained, the watchdogs I had programmed to prevent fraud. All of it flipped into reverse once the authorizations expired. Regulators didn't need me to whisper in their ear. The system screamed for me. I knew Daniel would try patching, maybe even call in a consulting firm, but it wouldn't matter. Every patch required a signature that no one in that building could provide anymore. The dominoes weren't just falling, they were accelerating. By 2 p.m., a state compliance officer flagged the company for investigation. By 3 o'clock, emails with the subject line, "Urgent legal response required," were piling up faster than anyone could answer. And through all of it, Mark Ellison, the CEO, who hadn't even bothered to attend my firing, sat in his office staring at headlines already leaking online. Major firm faces payroll catastrophe. They thought removing me was cutting fat. What they actually cut was their last line of defense. By the next morning, my phone lit up like a switchboard. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, desperate voicemails stacking one after another. First, it was Karen Mills from HR, trying to sound professional while her voice cracked. "Louise, if you could just come in and consult for a few days, we'd be willing to renegotiate terms." I deleted it without listening to the rest. An hour later, Daniel Price himself called. He skipped the politeness. "Name your price, whatever you want, we'll sign it today." I let that one go to voicemail too. By midday, it was Susan Whitfield, the board chair, her tone heavy with urgency, trying to sound like she was offering me dignity instead of begging for survival. "Louise, the board recognizes your contributions. We'd like to invite you back on mutually agreeable terms." The irony made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. For years, I had been invisible, the one they joked about replacing with an intern. Now they were tripping over themselves to get me back. But I answered none of them, because by the time their pleas reached me, the wheels were already turning too fast. Regulators had flagged their accounts, Lawsuits were brewing, and employees were flooding social media with proof that they hadn't been paid. The company was no longer a business. It was an emergency. And there was no coming back from that. By day 3, the collapse had a name: investigation. What began as missing paychecks turned into a swarm of auditors descending like vultures. The Department of Labor flagged unpaid wages, the State Banking Commission froze all accounts tied to the company, and insurance regulators demanded explanations for lapsed coverage. Vendors who had quietly tolerated late payments for years now smelled blood and pulled contracts overnight. By noon, headlines splashed across business sites. Ellison Group under federal review after payroll disaster. Employees shared screenshots of their empty stubs on Twitter, hashtags trended, and the board's carefully curated image of stability unraveled in real time. I didn't need to touch a keyboard. The very protections I'd built to keep the company compliant became weapons once my authorizations lapsed. Automated alerts fired to agencies, redundant logs flagged inconsistencies, and every safeguard shouted the same thing: non-compliant, investigate, freeze. Inside, Daniel Price must have been pacing trenches into the carpet. He had always trusted shortcuts, deferred renewals, delayed audits, cheap fixes, because he knew I was there to quietly clean the mess before anyone noticed. But without me, the shortcuts turned into flashing red alarms. Even Mark Ellison, the CEO who treated me like a replaceable cog, couldn't charm his way past regulators. No smooth words stopped frozen accounts. No handshake reopened a suspended credit line. They wanted signatures, renewals, authorizations, things only I had ever maintained. And now I was gone. By sunset, what had been one company was effectively a crime scene under glass, every transaction frozen for review. They thought firing me was cost-saving strategy. Instead, it was pulling the pin on their own grenade. By the end of the week, the company wasn't fighting for survival anymore. It was gasping on life support. Regulators didn't shut them down, not officially. That would have been merciful. Instead, they imposed something worse: continuous monitoring. Every month, every quarter, every contract, they now had to prove compliance to a rotating team of auditors. Each renewal cost thousands. Each missed checkbox triggered new fines. Millions would bleed away just to prove they weren't breaking rules. Money that could have gone to growth or stability now funneled into a never-ending inspection cycle. Employees started leaving in waves, not because they hated the work, but because no one wanted to build a career in a company under permanent scrutiny. Vendors demanded cash up front, banks raised rates, partners pulled out of negotiations. What used to be a proud headquarters in downtown Chicago turned into a hollow shell filled with lawyers, auditors, and frantic executives trying to spin bad news into strategic transitions. I didn't need to lift a finger. The system I built, the one they dismissed as invisible, was now their jailer. Daniel Price's arrogance had finally been exposed for what it was: dependence disguised as confidence. Mark Ellison's charm could not reopen doors that compliance had slammed shut. And Karen Mills could draft all the HR memos she wanted, but no carefully worded email would unfreeze a payroll system branded unsafe. They hadn't just lost money, they had lost trust. And once regulators marked you as toxic, no amount of rebranding or apologies could scrub it away. They had suffocated themselves, and I was only the silence that let it happen. When the final headlines broke, I sat on my porch with coffee in hand, watching the morning sun climb over Chicago. The company that once erased me now existed only as a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. I didn't shout. I didn't sabotage. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply walked away and let the machine I had built do exactly what it was designed to do: record, alert, enforce. They thought firing me would save them money. Instead, it cost them their future. And that was my closure. Leverage outlives loyalty every single time. They thought they were cutting dead weight, but what they really cut loose was the only thread holding their empire together. The day they fired me wasn't my ending. It was their expiration date, stamped and sealed by the very system they took for granted. Looking back, the lesson isn't just about revenge, it's about recognition. For years, I was invisible because my work was quiet, technical, and consistent. Yet those are the very qualities that kept everything running. Companies often celebrate the loudest voices in the room while ignoring the people who quietly hold everything together. That blindness has a cost. In my case, the cost was their survival. What I learned is this: systems outlive people, and arrogance is fatal when it underestimates the builder of those systems. Loyalty is important, but loyalty without respect becomes exploitation. And when you exploit the wrong person, the damage doesn't come in a single dramatic moment. It unfolds in silence, systematically, until it's too late. For anyone working today, the takeaway is clear. Don't mistake invisibility for weakness, in yourself or in others. Quiet skills, organization, persistence, discipline are often the most powerful leverage you'll ever hold. And if you're underestimated, don't waste energy proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. Invest in yourself, because leverage in your own hands never expires. How to get started today. 1. Write down 3 invisible strengths you bring to your work. 2. Identify one system or process only you truly understand. 3. Start planning how to turn that knowledge into leverage for your future. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated at work? Drop your story in the comments, share this video if it resonates, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that cut to the truth of corporate justice.